The world is finally catching up to what's really happening with President Trump's so-called Liberation Day tariffs. And it's no longer just talk. For Japan, this isn't just a headline. It's a full-blown economic earthquake. A whopping 24% tariff has been slapped on their exports to the US. And that's not just a jab, it's a body blow. Japan, a country that's long enjoyed smooth relations with past US administrations and a massive trade surplus, suddenly finds itself in a tight spot. Up until the very last minute, Tokyo's business elite were clinging to hope. They were crossing their fingers, whispering behind closed doors, "Maybe we'll get a pass." But then came the hammer. Not only did Trump announce the tariffs on general imports from Japan, but just days later he piled on, announcing a specific 25% tariff on Japanese cars, which just happened to be the country's crown jewel in exports. The reaction wasn't fiery outrage or public protests. It was more like someone had pulled the rug out from under them. Confusion, shock, even Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, who had pulled out all the stops to charm Trump at their Washington meeting, including the bold move of gifting him a golden samurai helmet, was left scratching his head. He called the tariffs very hard to understand. And judging by the morning news cycle, usually dominated by baseball scores and cherry blossom updates, it was clear the whole nation was thrown off balance. Concern had taken over. Nowhere is the anxiety more intense than in Japan's car industry, which employs nearly 6 million people. The big-name car companies were already weathering storms, tighter environmental regulations, slumping sales, and global market shifts. The fear now, that the tariffs might push some of them to the edge. Last year, in a move that shocked the entire industry, Honda and Nissan nearly merged. Two fierce, proud competitors considering joining forces just to survive. But while the big names might have some cushion, it's the smaller suppliers, the unsung heroes of the automotive world, that stand to lose the most. Mizuho Securities crunched the numbers and predicted that the new tariffs could add a staggering 1.6 trillion yen, about $10.67 billion, to export costs. That kind of blow could bruise the major car makers, but it could completely crush the smaller parts manufacturers who depend on every yen. Meanwhile, countries like Canada, the EU, and China, who got slapped with the same kind of tariffs, are already getting ready to strike back with their taxes. But Japan, they've been quiet. To really understand what's going on, though, we need to rewind to a moment most people didn't even notice. Back in 1988, Donald Trump lost a bidding war for a 58-key piano from the movie Casablanca. The winner? A Japanese trading company bought it for a private collector. Trump didn't make a huge scene about it, but the moment reflected something much bigger: Japan's rising economic power. That loss hit during a time when Japan seemed unstoppable, buying up American landmarks and outspending rivals across the globe. And it didn't sit right with Trump. The very next year, Trump popped up on national TV calling for a hefty 15 to 20% tariff on anything imported from Japan. At the time, he was still known mainly as a flashy Manhattan real estate mogul, not a politician. But the gears were turning. Sitting across from journalist Diane Sawyer, he said flat out, "I believe very strongly in tariffs," then launched into a broadside against not just Japan, but also West Germany, Saudi Arabia, and South Korea. His message was clear: America was being ripped off, and the only fix was to start charging countries that, in his view, were taking advantage of US generosity. Trump's beef with Japan wasn't just policy, it was personal. He was going toe-to-toe with Japanese developers in the New York real estate market. He'd brag about selling condos and office spaces to Japanese buyers at premium prices, even while borrowing millions from Japanese banks. But behind the scenes, he'd complain about how hard it was to deal with what he described as these tight-knit, formal Japanese corporate groups. So while he talked tough about Japan, he was also deeply entangled with them financially and professionally. It was a love-hate relationship that mirrored America's complicated feelings about Japan during the economic boom of the 80s. His firebrand rhetoric started drawing serious attention in 1987. Just days after the stock market crash, Trump stood in front of about 500 people at a Rotary Club in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He was 41, fresh off publishing The Art of the Deal, and this was one of the first times he publicly floated the idea of running for president. He didn't hold back, hammering Japan, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, arguing that they were exploiting the US and should be the ones footing the bill for America's federal deficit. One local Republican organizer, Mike Dunbar, who invited Trump to speak, remembered thinking the same thing many others did. Trump might be a newcomer, but his message was loud, clear, and familiar even decades later. That same year, Trump spent nearly $100,000 of his own money to run full-page ads in major US newspapers. The headline was pure Trump. There's nothing wrong with America's foreign defense policy that a little backbone can't cure. In the letter, he claimed countries like Japan had grown rich because the US had covered their defense bills for decades. That, he argued, let them stockpile economic power while Americans picked up the tab. His solution? Simple. Tax them. He wrote that the world was laughing at America as it protected oil shipments for allies who weren't returning the favor. Fast forward over 30 years, and Trump's old grudge is making more noise than ever. Japan, Asia's second biggest economy, is already juggling high inflation, a slow recovery, and now a new round of US tariffs thanks to Trump's second term. And things might get even worse. A potential recession is looming. Now, Japan's economy isn't just some small player in the global market. It's powered by exports, especially cars. The US is still their biggest buyer, with over 1.3 million vehicles shipped there in 2024 alone. That's nearly a third of all Japanese exports. So, any hit to that flow? It's a body blow to the economy. Economists are raising red flags. Takahide Kiyuchi from Nomura Research Institute says these tariffs could shrink Japan's GDP by over 0.7% in just a year. Looking further ahead, the Daiwa Institute predicts an even bigger hit. 1.8% knocked off the economy by 2029, when Trump is expected to leave office. And the signs are already there. Business confidence among Japan's biggest manufacturers dipped in March, the first drop in a year, according to the Bank of Japan's latest Tenkan survey. The timing couldn't be worse. Japan is finally seeing a moment where wages might start outpacing inflation, a goal it's chased for decades. Last year, companies boosted wages by an average of 5.28%, the biggest increase in more than 30 years. And in this year's spring labor talks, they bumped that up to 5.42%. Prices also rose 3.1% in 2023, the fastest climb in over 4 decades. The Bank of Japan, trying to keep inflation in check, raised short-term interest rates to 0.5% in January, the highest in 17 years. But there's a catch. Even with higher wages, companies are facing soaring global material costs and a weak yen. They're hesitant to keep raising pay, especially smaller businesses, which employ about 70% of Japan's workforce. That makes the current wage growth fragile. Shinichiro Kobayashi from Mitsubishi UFJ Research and Consulting warns that if global trade tensions escalate, it could trigger a worst-case scenario: shrinking exports, slashed corporate investments, and a domino effect across Japan's economy. So far, Japan's economy has been on a bit of a roll lately, notching up 3 straight quarters of growth. The final quarter of 2024 even posted a solid 2.2% annualized increase. But here's the catch. If the next 2 quarters slip into the red, Japan could find itself in a technical recession. And with these tariffs still weighing things down, that scenario might not be too far off. It's not just Wall Street feeling the shakeup either. The Trump administration's tariffs have reached all the way to the small factory districts of Tokyo. Imagine tossing a wrench into a finely tuned machine. That's what it's starting to feel like. Businesses across the capital are dealing with a wave of uncertainty, and many are starting to feel the heat. Take Masaharu Shiraishi, for example. He's 78 years old and has been running a machine parts company called White Technica for over 4 decades. His small factory is nestled in one of Tokyo's old-school industrial districts, a place where metalwork and craftsmanship have long thrived. He spent years supplying parts to airlines and electronics firms across Japan. But lately, his daily routine includes checking the news, not for the weather or sports, but for updates on US trade policy. Even though his own business hasn't been directly hit yet, the writing's on the wall. The sheet metal and paint shops he's worked with for years have been shutting down, one after another. The cost of doing business is rising, and Shiraishi is worried that a slowdown in exports will either dry up orders or force him to lower his prices. He's seen too many small factories disappear and fears his industry could be the next casualty. Still, he's not ready to give up. Shiraishi is determined to survive by developing new products and tapping into the government's small business support programs, which have recently been expanded to help companies like his navigate the tariff fallout. Big players like Hino Motors Limited are feeling the heat too. The Tokyo-based truck manufacturer sends about 7,500 semi-assembled truck kits to the US every year, with tariffs now jumping from 2.54% to a daunting 25%. They're bracing for rising prices and potential sales slumps. Even though Hino has factories in the States, they're keeping a close watch on Washington's next move, knowing it could reshape their entire export game. A recent survey by Tokyo Shoko Research painted a clear picture of the concern spreading among local businesses. Nearly half of the 959 companies that responded said they expect these tariffs to negatively impact their performance. About 21% predicted serious harm, while another 27% expected at least some decline. And when it came to taking action, most were still stuck in a fog. Almost 65% admitted they hadn't done anything specific yet, likely because the real impact is still hard to measure. The Tokyo metropolitan government is trying to get ahead of the curve. Starting April 4th, they launched free support services for small and mid-sized businesses, offering management and financial advice. Within days, they were already fielding calls, like one from a medical equipment exporter looking for financial aid. Local districts like Ota, Arakawa, and Edogawa followed suit, setting up advice centers of their own. But so far, few businesses have reached out. The situation is still unfolding, and many are just waiting to see how bad things get. In the meantime, business owners like Shiraishi are holding their breath, watching closely, and hoping to find a way forward through the uncertainty. Now, the big question is, how could things actually get better between the US and Japan? Well, with Trump, it's kind of like trying to read tea leaves in a hurricane. You never really know what he's getting at. But during his Liberation Day press conference in Japan, while flashing that now famous tariff chart, he actually tossed some unexpected compliments Japan's way. He called the Japanese people great, and hey, that counts for something. Japan was one of the few places that gave him a warm reception during his first term, thanks in no small part to his surprisingly wholesome golf and hamburgers bromance with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. But let's not pretend there aren't tensions. Trump's had beef with Japan for years, even before he got into politics. He's long claimed Japan has been gaming the US through sneaky trade barriers and currency moves. And sure, there might be some truth to that. Still, Japan's also poured massive investment into the US, so it's not exactly a one-way street. On defense, Trump's been loud about wanting Japan to take more responsibility, less US protector, more you handle your own business. Yet here's the twist. Japan hasn't hit back with outrage. In fact, their response has been surprisingly chill. That silence might actually speak volumes. Ishiba, Japan's current power player, has already floated some big gestures, like possibly pumping $1 trillion of investment into the US and beefing up Japan's military. One major move: stationing missiles that can reach China. It's a strong signal that Japan's not just talking, it's taking real steps. Behind closed doors, you can bet Japan's top brass are hoping for a soft landing. Retaliation? Not really on the table. Most of what Japan buys from the US, things like farm products and natural gas, aren't easy to target without hurting themselves. And the public tone has been anything but fiery. The Prime Minister and his Cabinet Secretary Hayashi didn't even hint at revenge, just called the US tariffs regrettable. Trade Minister Yoji Muto was more measured, saying any move from Japan had to be bold and speedy, but calm and rational. In Japan, there's this phrase, reading the air, and right now, the air says compromise. All signs point to Japan trying to keep things smooth, even when others are raising their voices. If that continues, and maybe if the emperor extends another warm state visit invite, this story could end in a rare win-win. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, comment, and turn on post notifications to stay updated with our latest content.